Yes, Tej, good to go.
I call upon the meeting to order. Good evening, friends. I am Tejinder Singh, and I welcome you all for today's Rotary Joint Club meeting. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome today's eminent speaker, Rotarian Honorable Lord Hunt of Wirral. Thank you very much, sir, for your valuable time for today's joint meeting. We are very excited to have you here and very eager to hear from you. I would just like to take a moment to welcome all the district Rotary clubs and presidents who are here with us today in support. From Rotary Club of Thane Uptown, Mr. Ashok Singh. From Rotary Club of Thane, Lake City, Anirudh Vairakarji. RCT Lake City, RCT Paradise, Mr. Suman Kumar Jha. RCT North End, Rahul Khandelwalji. RCT Thane East, Shashikant Kolekarji. Also, Rotary Club of Thane Downtown, Nisha Raju. I hope she's here. And thank you, Dr. Priyanka and Ms. Aparna. I welcome you all as well. I welcome all the guests from District 1130 from London, Rotary President Mr. Andrew Wally and Secretary Mrs. Suresh Barwani from Rotary Club of Edgware and Stanmore. I also welcome, do we have Sangeeta Kapoor here or Nitin Dure? I think we don't have them.
She is here.
She's here. Sangeeta is there?
Yeah.
So, all right. Welcome, Sangeeta. She's our district secretary.
We also have Rotary Club of London President David Johnson with us.
All right. Hi. Welcome, Mr. President David. I also welcome our past Chief Coordinator and past President Dinesh Mehta ji, very senior. Welcome you, sir. I thank Rotary Club of Thane Downtown, President Ms. Nisha Raju for co-hosting this meeting. It is commendable that young Rotaractors are volunteering and participating in Rotary events. Thank you all the members of my Rotary Club of Thane Royals for your support, especially my Rotary immediate past President Santosh Kadamji, Rotary Secretary Umesh Patel, and Pratik Vidwans. I would all like to thank our club treasurer and club mentor, Mr. Vijay Keval Ramani, for his guidance and he has helped us to organize such a unique event. Now I would like to request Rotarian President Suman Kumar Jha of RCT Paradise to deliver the 4-way test. Suman Kumar ji, please unmute yourself. Suman Kumar ji. Can you hear us?
Yeah, kindly unmute Suman.
Yes. Yeah, now I have able to unmute. I was just. Thank you, Jinder. I'll just go through the 4-way test, which 1.2 million Rotarian follow religiously. Of the things we think, say, and do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendship? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you.
Thank you, Suman Kumar Jha ji. I now request Rotarian Dinesh Mehta ji of RCT Lake City to introduce today's speaker, Rotarian Honorable Lord Hunt. Rotarian Dinesh ji.
Yeah, thanks to Tej for giving me the opportunity to introduce a parliamentarian, Rotarian Honorable Lord David Hunt of Wirral from the United Kingdom. David, of Chairman the Financial Services Division of DAC Beechcroft LLP, having been its senior partner from 1996 to 2005. He joined the firm in 1965 and became a partner in 1969. He specialized in regulation and spent much of 2009 conducting an independent review of legal services regulation on behalf of Law Society of England and Wales. He was instructed by the Committee and Industry Department of the State of Guernsey to review both insurance and banking on the island. In 2008, he completed a successful independent review of the financial ombudsman services. In recent years, David also led the legal teams on the ABI Raising Standard Initiative, on the establishment of the PPIAB, the creation of IFA, and the setting up of the pension advisory support system. David was awarded the MBE in 1973 and elected Member of Parliament of Wirral from 1976 to 1983. And then he elected for the Wirral West 1983 to 1997. He has been a member of the Privy Council since 1990. From 1979 to 1995, he was a member of the UK government, including cabinet posts as Secretary of States for Wales, Secretary of State for Employment, and Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. He was treasurer of the Queen household from 1987 to 1989. David stepped down from the cabinet after 5 years in July 1995 to become senior partner. He was made a life peer in 1997. He took over as a chair of the Association of Conservative Peers in March 2016. And he is both co-chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Legal and Constitutional Affairs and the president of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Occupational Health and Safety. Lord Hunt was independent chair of the Press Complaints Commission between 2011 and 2014 and set up its successor body, the Independent Press Conference Organization. He is a senior independent director of a number of private sector firms. Now I present to you Parliamentarian Lord David Hunt of Wirral, who will now speak on you to the functioning of the parliamentary democracies need to change. Friends, please welcome Lord David.
Thank you very much indeed for that fascinating introduction. As I look back, I've been going far too long. And you've reminded me of all sorts of roles I've played in the past. But the most important opportunity I have is I regard it as a great honor to address the Rotary Club of Thane Royals, and in particular in the presence of my own president, the Rotary Club of London, the first club established with a charter outside North America. I warmly embrace the Rotary motto, which is, of course, service above self. And to my mind, that's an ideal motto for anyone who goes into politics. Now, you've reminded me, my subject on which I'm to speak is the functioning of parliamentary democracies, the need to change. Although it's a subject I relish tackling, it's also a challenge for anybody who calls themselves a conservative to embrace change. More of that later. But I just returned to the motto, service above self, because politics should be about public service. And when I first got involved and joined the Conservative Party in 1957, this is far too long ago, I joined the Conservative Party because of its fundamental beliefs in the rights of the individual, free enterprise, freedom of speech, freedom from fear, freedom of opportunity. Now, they call the Palace of Westminster the mother of parliaments, and we have arguably the oldest democracy in the world. And in India, you are the most populous democracy in the world. And in both of our great nations, we hear all the time about how weak our systems of democracy have become and how our values are under threat. I like to believe all of that is exaggerated. Now, my mentor was, of course, Sir Winston Churchill, who was Chancellor of my University of Bristol. And when I first got involved in student politics in 1962, I used to exchange telegrams with Sir Winston Churchill, who urged me to debate, to talk, to use argument. And of course, he described democracy as quite the worst system of government yet devised, apart from all the others that have been tried from time to time. And he had a wonderful way with words, and it inspired me to get involved in politics. So, like Churchill, I'm a conservative, and my instinct is consequently to prefer the tried and tested to the untried and untested. But we must understand, however, that times change. Both our countries have faced considerable challenges from the COVID-19 virus. Even before that, so many factors were in play, challenging all our assumptions. Let me just list them for a moment because they're on all our minds. First of all, the growing population and urbanization, climate change, the rise of China, globalization and the internet, possible isolationism in the United States, and of course now Britain leaving the European Union. Your system in India and ours in the United Kingdom have certain similarities, of course, and certain differences. If I just look at the similarities first, both systems have 2 houses of Parliament. Now, I chair in the House of Lords all the government peers, and we've just had a meeting an hour ago to talk about our scheme of restoration and renewal, because the present Houses of Parliament is crumbling. There's a serious risk of fire, and we're going to have to move out to allow probable. In many ways, you can't renovate a palace without giving freedom to those who are going to undertake the work. So we have to move out. And we've just been debating that. And if anyone wants to ask me any questions about that, because we keep postponing the evil day when we have to move out. But both our systems have 2 houses of Parliament. Both systems have an independent judiciary and an active Supreme Court overseeing the rule of law. Both systems have a universal franchise for elections. Those are the similarities between our 2 systems. The differences are just as notable. You have an executive president as head of state. You have a federal system. Your upper house, unlike the House of Lords, is elected. But many of the challenges we face are so similar. How to entrench accountability, how to defeat COVID-19, how to prevent terrorism eating away at our freedoms and our security. Now, I've been in UK politics since I joined the Conservative Party in 1957. I went to my first conference for the Conservative Party in 1963. I engaged in debate with Harold Macmillan, who was then our Prime Minister, at a time of great crisis. And then, of course, we had Harold Wilson elected in 1964, and I became a candidate for a seat in Bristol, which I fought the election in 1970. So I've been able to watch 9 prime ministers at work at close hand, and I got to know them all reasonably well. Harold Wilson in particular, because he met his wife, Mary, who sadly has also just died, on the tennis courts of Wirral, where I was elected Member of Parliament. And then James Callaghan. The day I entered Parliament was the day Harold Wilson resigned and James Callaghan became Prime Minister. Then, of course, Margaret Thatcher. Now, of all the prime ministers I knew, I probably knew Margaret Thatcher better than any other. I did, of course, know Ted Heath when he won that election in 1970, until he was defeated again by Harold Wilson in 1974. But Margaret Thatcher, although I disagreed with her on what I would call one nation conservatism, which she used to say to me, "You mean no nation conservatism?" We used to have lots of discussions about one nation, where I followed the Disraeli line of wanting to join up our two worlds of the rich and the poor, which Disraeli described in his novel Sybil. But Margaret Thatcher and I had regular discussions. I got to know her probably better than any other prime minister I've served. Although, of course, John Major and I were close colleagues. Don't ask me too many questions about his affair with Edwina Currie. That's the sort of more challenging side of politics, because Edwina Currie and I, when she was Edwina Cohen, we went to school together. So I knew her very well. But don't let's get diverted, because John Major was Prime Minister for nearly 7 years, and I had the honor to serve him in his cabinet, just as I had Margaret Thatcher. And then, of course, Tony Blair in the great landslide of 1997. He remained Prime Minister for as long as Margaret Thatcher had been Prime Minister, 11 years. And then Gordon Brown, who was eventually defeated by David Cameron, who formed a coalition with the Liberal Democrats. Then after the result of the referendum on our departure from the European Union, he gave way to Theresa May. And then, of course, Boris Johnson last year in July took over from Theresa May. Now, each of those prime ministers was remarkable in his or her, especially her, own way, but they all had certain qualities in common. My experience of Margaret Thatcher goes back to the time when I was selected for the seat of Wirral, and the then Speaker of the House of Commons, Selwyn Lloyd, who had been Foreign Secretary, he decided to resign. He was the Member of Parliament for Wirral. So there was a by-election. And this was the first occasion on which any Prime Minister had ever decided to turn up and fight on the doorstep in a by-election. But Margaret Thatcher was that sort of person. She wanted to take the fight to the people. And so suddenly, during the course of my campaign in Wirral to get elected for the first time as a Member of Parliament, Margaret Thatcher arrived. And it was almost as if we hit it off immediately. And she drew the crowds, and I got in with a record majority. And as soon as I arrived in the House of Commons, she invited me to join her on the front bench, and I was then on the front bench under Margaret Thatcher for the next, from 76 to 1990, the next 14 years, I was part of her team. But all those prime ministers had certain qualities in common, a wide vision. I always want a leader to share with us all what their vision is, where they wish us to go, where they want the country to go, what standards they want to embrace. She also had, as did the other prime ministers, a powerful intellect, an ability to hold the Conservative Party together, and an indelible personality. And I could, and do ask me if you want to, any questions about all my experience in UK politics. But to summarize them and to return to the theme of Rotary, service above self. When I was involved in Parliament, on the front bench, there were constant accusations of corruption in politics. Who was donating to which political party? And I just happened to be in the Cabinet Office at that time, and with John Major, we decided to confront the problem once and for all. And with Michael Heseltine's help, we approached a senior judge, Lord Nolan. Michael Nolan, we said to Lord Nolan, will you investigate? Is there any evidence of corruption in British politics? And Lord Nolan held quite a lengthy inquiry. He summoned a whole series of people to work alongside him. And eventually, he reported that there was no evidence of corruption in British political life, but there was a perception of corruption. So I asked Michael Nolan to draw up a set of principles that would guide anyone coming into politics. And those are now known as the Nolan 7 Principles of Conduct in Public Life. And they mirror very much of what we in Rotary stand for. Objectivity, integrity. You probably know all the principles as well as I do. And the challenge, if I could summarize in conclusion, what I see the great challenge is, and then I'm very happy to deal with any points anybody would like to raise. The challenge in a democracy, I believe, is somehow both to embrace these great figures, these titanic personalities in politics, in our countries, and to craft a system that evolves with time and changing circumstances, always ensuring that even though when these titans win big elections by substantial margins, that the rule of law holds fast and they are held accountable, not only at the time of elections, but between elections too. So therefore, parliamentary democracies, yes, they need to change, but it must be a constant process of change and only change for the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Rotarian Lord Hunt. That was really an outstanding speech, and we learned a great deal of things about political democracies and the need to change. Thank you, sir, for that. Friends, our fellow resident, President Rotarian Ashok Singh of RCT Uptown, who is the VP in Diagnostics at InBios India Company, and who has won the Best Rotarian Award twice in the last 5 years, he will now proceed to moderate the Q&A session, the question and answer session. Over to you, President Ashok Singh. President Ashok, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, President Tej, for giving me this session. Honorary Rotarian Lord Hunt, Member of Parliament of UK, President Tejendra Ji, members of Rotary Club Thane Royals, Rotary Club Thane Uptown, Thane Lake City, Thane Paradise, Thane North End, Thane East, Rotrax from Thane Downtown, and Rotrax from Thane Uptown, as well as Rotarians across the international clubs present here. Good evening to everyone. Honored to be part of today's proceedings. I would like to open this session now for this question and answer. Now, gentlemen, can you put your hands up so that we can unmute you and take your questions so that Lord Hunt can try to answer them to the best of his ability. But before that, I have few questions for Lord. Sir, my question to you is, you have just talked about 7 conducts of the politician to be followed in public life. That is fantastic. Now, my question to you is, many times people with dubious background get elected to the parliament and using money power, muscle power. So how do we control it, sir? What is a way out? And as a Britain is the mother of all democracy, please, enlighten us. What is a way out for people to follow so that the system itself can be, made more accessible, more genuine for everyone across the world?
Well, my answer to that, President, is first of all, it is up to people to decide how they vote in elections. And at the end of the day, people will elect an individual to be their member of parliament.
Correct.
So therefore, you have to have a system which can accept whoever is elected, whatever their background, whatever their beliefs. And you hope that during the course of the election and previously, people have had the opportunity to ask questions and to clarify the beliefs of the individual they're electing. But you're quite right. The individual may well turn out to be somebody who doesn't necessarily meet up to the expectations of their voters. In which case we come back to the code. Those Nolan 7 principles of conduct in public life have now been accepted by both our House of Commons and our House of Lords as the code which governs the conduct of parliamentarians. And we have set up a commission in both Houses of Parliament so that your Mother of Parliaments has an obligation to ensure that everybody who is elected lives up to the code. And at the start of each parliament, both in the House of Commons and in the House of Lords, everybody who wishes to register for that session of Parliament has to swear on the Bible or affirm an oath that they will observe the code. And there is provision for any complaint to be made at any stage if it is felt that the individual has not complied with the code. So although you can never cater for every eventuality, at least we have a code of conduct, just as Rotary has a clear vision and obligation. So I hope the Mother of Parliaments and your Parliament too will elect and have parliamentarians who observe those 7 principles of conduct in public life and generally do nothing at any stage which would bring the reputation of Parliament into disrepute. So you can set up the system, you can lay down the rules, you can have enforcement, possible suspension, fining, etc. I remember once a member of Parliament, Alex Salmon, who subsequently became First Minister of Scotland, he suddenly in a moment seized the mace, and I moved that he be suspended for conduct ill-befitting a parliamentarian. And he was suspended for 3 months. And do you know, when I met him as a leading minister, when he was First Minister for Scotland, Alex Salmon hadn't forgotten. He said, "I remember you deprived me of 3 months' earnings." Not that he held it against me because he was making a protest at the time. But we do have rules and we do have enforcement, and that's the best way to make sure the system lives up to all our expectations.
Thank you, Lord Hart. It was great, listening to you. Especially you have interacted with so much legendary figures across the world, like Margaret Thatcher and some of the great figures in the UK as well as the world over. Now, I'm getting a lot of questions. My second question is to you is, how can we deal with elected representative who does not live up or perform to the expectations of the masses? Should there be a law that these representatives be changed? Because this is very common in today democracies across the world, where people elect, but then they find that these representatives do not, live up to the expectations of the masses. Can you enlighten us, sir, something on that? What is the way out?
The way out is to have a law, which we have now introduced in the UK, that if a certain percentage, I think it's still 10% of the electorate in a particular constituency, want, for whatever reason, to express a lack of confidence in their existing member of parliament, they can petition for another election. And the law demands that if 10% so petition, then another election is held. And that individual who has been elected has to stand for re-election. That's probably the most effective way to deal with the problem that you've described.
Thank you, Lord. I mean, this is something which every democracies across the world need to follow. I mean, system where there can be accountability, as you said, in public life is the need of the hour. My third question to you, which I've received now is, question is, in democracy, sometimes brakes on development due to economy is put because of various reasons. What is a way out? I mean, this is a question somebody has put. Brakes on development in economy and other things. So what is the way out, sir?
Well, it shouldn't. It shouldn't put the brakes on the economy, provided the government lives up to its promises and its manifesto. At each election, the political parties set out their program for a parliament. And that will include economic growth, because without growth in the economy, then you cannot afford all the services that the government wished to provide. Now, take the present pandemic. There was a real concern that the National Health Service in the UK would be overwhelmed by the demand. And it became immediately clear that the economy was going to suffer as a result of the measures necessary to try and protect the NHS from being overwhelmed by the pandemic. Now, as the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has just explained, this is now an opportunity in the slow recovery for the economy to bounce back. He put it in a major speech just a few days ago as to bounce forward, not just bounce back. And it is very clear that every national government has to bear in mind that in order to afford all the things we want to afford, we have to have growth in the economy, we have to have productivity. So therefore, democracy, or holding the government to account, should include making sure that there is every opportunity in a democracy for the economy to grow. And that holds the key that we can then proceed to concentrate the greatest help to those in the greatest need.
Thank you, Lord Hunt. Next question which I have received is, sir, you spoke on corruptions in politics. We have corruptions everywhere in India and maybe in UK too. How is it the corruption in UK, and are there laws which are still need to be changed? Laws which needs to be upgraded so that there is a transparency in public life by the leaders?
Well, one of the Nolan's 7 principles of conduct in public life is transparency, openness. And that is fundamental. The one area that I am concerned about is, of course, the digital age. We are moving forward so fast at the present time. There's a whole new breed of hackers, global hackers, who seek to undermine our very systems. Data protection is another key area. So you're quite right. We constantly have to upgrade. Now, many years ago, I was Cabinet Minister for Science, and I had to make a decision about whether or not we channeled additional resources to put an individual into space, or whether we put the same amount of money into what was called the Large Hadron Collider project based in Geneva. I could go into much more detail, but just let me summarize by saying this was an effort to provide material to identify Higgs boson, the smallest possible particle. I went to Geneva to announce to our team there that I was going to channel the resources into what was called CERN. And I met a young Cambridge undergraduate who had just thought up the World Wide Web. So my children still think my most important document in my archive of ministerial office for 16 years is a headline, "Minister Launches World Wide Web." That was a speech I made in Geneva. But way back then, 1994, no one had any idea about how the internet would revolutionize our lives. And so my only proviso in answer to your question is we just have to look again at all the laws to make sure that they cover possible fraud or criminal activity through the internet. But we've got to keep vigilant, and we have to keep thinking and rethinking new ways of protecting our citizens.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Next question which I have received is, India and UK both follow very old law and democratic value systems. So what are 3 areas which you find a country must change by changing the laws time and again so that it becomes viable, as you said, with the changing times?
So which are the 3
laws you feel should be introduced so that we keep in pace with the changing times across the world? Like you talked about today, digitalization, and there are various other things where democracies across the world can get together on various issues like terrorism, or maybe certain issues where governments could come to a single agenda, and we can take it up across the democracies to put it up one point agenda so that it is beneficial for every democracy today.
Well, the first of my 3 would be, and this is against a background, I was president of the Atlantic Association of Young Political Leaders. So I used to meet political leaders in the United States and throughout the countries of Europe. And we decided the most important thing was, in order to preserve our freedom and our way of life, we had to bring in policies which would promote peace. So that would be my first. I think we need to do much more, eradicating threats, not just the nuclear threat, but just threats generally, which affect the lives of ordinary individuals. My second theme would be climate change. I think we have to face up to the fact, whoever's fault it is, and I think we spend too much time arguing about fault and blame. We just need to take this world forward with the benefit of science into tackling climate change and making that a huge priority. So peace, climate change. My third is probably to promote the cause of those who get left behind, the vulnerable people, not just those who suffer from hunger, famine, but also those who are getting left behind by the digital age. And I would like to see the nations of the world combine, not just to give people mobile telephones, that's really a side issue, but just to make sure that everyone has an equal opportunity to benefit from the digital age. So peace, climate change, and digital age would be my three issues around which the world should unite.
Thank you, sir. Next question, which I have received from the Rotarians are, in a democratic country like UK, party that holds a majority in parliament holds the power. I think it's true everywhere. Relating to this, Brexit, due to coalition politics, was the parliament really in control of the situation, sir?
Well, in a democratic country, you have to have a government, and a government that is able to govern. Now, in the UK, we had a real problem last year in that the Conservative Party, having won the previous election, had lost most of its key members of parliament and only had 285 members of parliament, whereas you need, in a parliament of 650, you need 326. So it couldn't govern anymore. And in many ways, there was then emerging a coalition, but it wasn't a coalition of government, it was a coalition of parliament. The government suddenly found it couldn't do anything. And parliament wasn't really in control because parliament can't be a government. Parliament has to hold the government to account. So therefore, what we needed, and Boris Johnson provided it, was the opportunity for another general election to elect a party that had the majority of seats. And Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson went head to head, and eventually Boris Johnson won with a majority of 80. And suddenly you had a government again. But it does mean that the government must be held to account by Parliament, but Parliament was never really in control of the situation last year and is now in a happier place as long as it continues to hold elected government to account.
Thank you, sir. I'm receiving, many questions. I'll try to, be selective. As a member of parliament, what kind of perspective you have while taking a decision? Do you feel, this is what I am adding, that the poorest of the poor, a person who is very common, do you, take into his account while making a decision, or your decision tends to be, something which is majority in the in your system of the?
Now, that's such a good question. And all I can do is quote Edmund Burke, because Edmund Burke was very clear that although a member of parliament has to listen to their constituents, they must never, ever sacrifice their judgment to their opinion, the opinion of their constituents. They must make up their own mind. That's what they're elected to do. So you must, of course, listen all the time. And in my area of Wirral in the northwest of England, I had fellow members of parliament like Frank Field, who was the Labour member, Linda Chalker, who was a fellow Conservative member. And we used to sit down and discuss issues with our constituents in surgeries so that people could come and talk face to face with their member of parliament and communicate their views. But it was always against the background that we had to decide, but we must listen. And perhaps all parliamentarians everywhere need to listen a little bit more.
Thank you so much, sir. That was fantastic, because all the parliamentarians need to listen to the councils first before deciding. That was great, sir. Another question which has come to me is, what is your view, sir, on current pandemic situation induced by maybe China and China's ambition to become a superpower at the cost of everything, at the cost of, lives of the people across the world? It's a fantastic question, which I would like to have some view from your side.
Once this pandemic is conquered, and I'm optimistic because I see the results from the research. I'm a great believer in science and scientists and medical experts. I'm sure they will find a way although we still haven't found a cure for HIV. And there are all sorts of other problems and diseases over which we don't have proper control. But I'm sure that once we're through to the other side of this pandemic, and we shouldn't get diverted in the interim, we must have a full and proper inquiry into how this virus came into the context of human beings. I don't know what happened in Wuhan. I think the World Health Organization has already started an inquiry into what happened. I hear what the President of the United States has said. My goodness, he does have opinions on everything. I'm not sure I agree with many of them, but at least he has voiced the view that there may be some connection. It's too early to say. I do know that it hit hard in China, first of all, and they did lose a lot of their citizens as a result of the virus. But no doubt, eventually we'll find out exactly what happened. On the wider question of China, I did make a parliamentary visit with my parliamentary colleagues Ken Clarke and Peter Mandelson to Beijing. And I did have discussions with the president and the other leaders of China. They told me that they very much wanted to see the UK, the United States, Russia, China, and all the unaligned nations sitting down at the same table, finding solutions to all the problems of the world. But there is no doubt in my mind that they were playing the longer game. China doesn't look at the next 5, 10, or even 50 years. They look at centuries to come. And they are constantly looking ahead, not for immediate advantage, but for slow, long-term superpower status. And so I think it is a good question. It does have the ambition not to become, but to remain a superpower for centuries to come. And we need to be alert to that and find ways of working with that ambition and, in a way, containing the ambition so that everyone has an equal opportunity.
Thank you, Lord. Sir, looking at your answer now, another question which comes to my mind is, now that India is a emerging power, is it time for India to make a place for itself in United Nations Council as a permanent member? Because I feel that everyone is supporting that it's really a time for India to come into fore with our principles of peace and Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which is embracing the humanity as one family. Is it time for India to come into, a permanent seat as member?
That's a hugely controversial question. I've always supported the United Nations. In fact, I took part in the first model assembly in the student world. And I remember I then represented China in the Security Council. But it wasn't the present China, it was Taiwan. And so when I got up to speak in the Security Council, this is in the Model Assembly, the theater of international politics, the whole assembly walked out. And I remember it was a bit of a bad start for me as a student politician to start to speak and everyone walked out. So I've always regarded the status of those nations on the Security Council with a degree of skepticism as to whether or not there should be a permanent place, for example, for the United Kingdom, as well as for, the other nations who are permanent members of the Security Council. I've always regarded the General Assembly as being the most important body in the United Nations. The only problem is that they don't work together as much as they should. But on the key question of whether India should become one of those nations that is allowed to become permanent members of the Security Council, that's not a matter for me, that's a matter for India. I certainly think that this century will see the continued emergence of India as a superpower. As to when that will translate into a permanent place on the Security Council or whatever body governs the United Nations, only history will record. But I certainly think that India is a rising global power, and we will see that in the coming years.
Thank you so much, Lord Hunt, for your support to India. And one last question. What steps do you take to ensure the participation of younger generation in democratic process so that the system is continued for times to come in future?
Now, the last time I was asked that question was by Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher, when she won the election in 1979, and I was president of the British Youth Council and the Youth Lobby, she said, "What steps do you think we should take as the UK government to ensure that more young people participate in the democratic process?" And the discussion with Margaret Thatcher went in two ways. First of all, she did not agree with my idea of lowering the voting age to enable more younger people or even younger people to participate. So we moved on from that to what other steps could be taken to ensure the participation of the younger generation. And we agreed that education needed to be much more about participation. How could any individual, either on their own or collectively, influence politics for good? And we've seen this with climate change, where younger people are being listened to much more effectively now as they look forward 50, 60 years ahead within their lifespan. And they look at the older generation as perhaps being wedded to the past much more than they are. So my answer to Margaret Thatcher then was give more opportunity to the younger generation, both in education and in work, so that they can make the best of their individual abilities in a collective environment.
That's great message, Lord Hunt. And thank you so much. It was a great session indeed, listening from your self here. And we are really, thankful to you. I again give it to Tajendra ji to take over the proceedings. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tajendra, please unmute.
Thank you, Lord Hunt. That was really an enriching session. And we are very, very happy to hear your views over the subject. I would now like to move ahead. And I would like to request Vijay Keval Ramani ji to introduce some of the guests and welcome them who had joined during the speech of Honorable Lord Hunt.
Thank you, President Tej. Friends, we would like to welcome our international dignitaries first. So I would start with David Johnson, the President of Rotary Club of London, the host club of the speaker. David, your views, please, and kindly introduce yourself. David, are you there? David seems to have been off. So we'll get back to his microphone has just failed. We'll move ahead. Suresh Bharwani, kindly unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Past President Vijay. My name is Suresh Bhavani. I'm afraid my microphone just failed. I've had to change microphones.
Yeah, David will
I
get.
don't know if you can hear me now. But I'd like to thank the club for its invitation to me to be a party to hearing our member, Lord David Hunt, speak. As ever, it was a fantastic talk, and I found it as interesting as I hope you did. I'm also pleased that no one actually asked those questions that he wished to avoid about Edwina Currie. I didn't have the nerve to ask them either, but it is always great to be part of this international community. And I think it is fantastic that we can communicate like this. And I'd like to put a little bit of advertisement in that I'm having a speaker from the Bombay Natural History Museum in 2 weeks' time. And I'd like to invite you all back to hear Dr. Deepak Patel talk about the environment, because I think the environment, as Lord David Hunt was identifying, is one of the main things that we can, as democratic nations, get together to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Suresh, now please continue.
Yes, thank you. My name is Suresh Bhavani. I'm from the Edgwin Stanmore Rotary Club. I'm the honorary secretary of the club. I'm the international district chairman of 1130. And Lord Hunt, I found your speech really wonderful. I thought you spoke really well. And I'm also a part of Toastmasters in the UK. And I wish you well with all the with all your endeavors. And thank you, Vijay and the president of Thane for inviting me. Thanks.
Thank you, Suresh. Now I would request John Buchanan to introduce himself, please. John, you are unmuted.
Thank you. I'm with the Rotary Club of Manatee River in Florida in the United States, and really enjoyed Lord Hunt's description of Parliament. Thank you for allowing me to join the meeting.
Thank you, John. I think Andrew has left. So now we also welcome our DGN Kailash Jethani with us. Kailash, would you like to say a few words?
Friends, first things first, I would like to thank God for small mercies. I was at some other place installing some intra clubs, but when I came here, really this situation of COVID is a blessing in disguise. Otherwise, there was no way that we could have had a Lord from UK, Lord Hunt, coming and addressing our clubs in India and in Bombay, in Thane. So thank you, Lord Hunt, for coming and addressing us. Your views were very prudent. Of course, we got enlightened with whatever you said in your views, and we have got two guests, which are David and Suresh from UK, and we've got Andrew from US. Of course, this is what probably Holger Knack must have thought when he must have coined the current year's theme, which is Rotary opens opportunities. So I guess we have got opportunity to meet you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Vijay.
Thank you, Kailash. I would now request dignitaries from other district. Balan, can you unmute yourself and speak, please?
Very good evening to all. This is Anita Balan here from Rotary Club, Thane Lake City. I am very new to this club, so I don't have much to speak about it. But at the same time, I'm enjoying myself over here. And it is very fortunate today for me to attend this session and hear Lord speaking, fabulously well. Thank you, Lord, for all the insight. And I am really honored. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We got from Satna, we got Rotarian Manoj Jadhav. Manoj, would you like to say something? He's from Satna Velag.
Sir, it was a nice session. One thing I would like to ask Lord Hunt, that it is said that power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the worst heresy is that the office sanctifies the holder of it. So what is your opinion, sir?
I didn't really hear the question well. Could you repeat it, please, for me?
Well, okay, sir, I will repeat. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah, you're
Yes, I
audible.
can
Please go
hear.
ahead.
Okay. Sir, it is said that power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the worst heresy is that the office sanctifies the holder of it. So what is your opinion?
I'm not sure what I'm being asked to give an opinion about, but I strongly believe that everyone who attains power should observe the highest possible professional principles and should be held to account. Now, you're quite right that power without limitation corrupts, and there is long-standing evidence in history of that time and time again. So what the system should ensure is that there is a constant holding to account of any individual who acquires any sort of power, whether at global, national, regional, or local level. And provided the system has the right checks and balances, then I do not believe that the old maxim of power corrupts will achieve its long-standing meaning, as long as people continue to embrace the highest possible standards of conduct in public life.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, friends. Thank you. Over to President Tej. I would also recognize Rotarian Sarah from Rotary Club of Tema Meridian, Ghana. Welcome. And we had Andrew Worley from Rotary Club of Stanmore and Edgware, President, but I think he is not there. Back to you, Tejinder ji.
Thank you, Rotarian Vijayji. I would like to take this opportunity to invite all the guests and dignitaries present today to our musical event Kabir Ke Dhun by Kabir Cafe Musical Group on 25th of July. We'll share with you the link soon on this. Now the songs which will be played in this musical event will be based on Saint Kabir's poems, and I'm sure it will be a soothing, unique and entertaining experience for all of you. Now I would like to request Rotarian Secretary Umesh Patel to update us on the secretarial announcements and happy announcement. Over to you, Umesh.
Thank you, President. Before that, I think Nisha Raju, President of Rotary Club of Thane Downtown, wants to say something.
Yes, please.
Nisha, please. Never mind. She is not here, I think.
Isha, unmute yourself.
Yeah, I wasn't able to unmute myself earlier.
Okay.
Really sorry. So I would just want to thank Rotary Club of Thane Royals to give me this opportunity. This has been one of the first times that we got this opportunity to, jointly conduct a project with you all. It has been really great. Also, having said that, we also had a few interactors of Thane Downtown, the only community-based interact club, join us for the session as well. Thank you so much, sir. It was really glad to be a part of this informative session. The knowledge sharing was amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, Umesh, please.
So I would like to make some secretarial announcements. So I would start with first thing. Today we had an attendance of almost 80 members at peak, out of which we had 10 overseas guests attending this meeting. So that was all because of Lord Hunt and his charismatic personality. We had good number of attendance. Apart from that, we have a happy announcement where our club member Urmila Polai is celebrating her birthday on 27th of July. So we wish her on her birthday on behalf of our whole club. There is a district announcement where there is a second president-elect meet, which is happening on 26th of July, which will be attended by myself as president-elect for the year. And other announcement on behalf of other clubs, we have Thane North End, which is celebrating Kargil Vijay Divas, which is on 26th of July. Other further details will be shared by the club president and secretary to other Rotarians. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rotarian Umesh. Just want to add one more event, which is the upcoming event of Rotary Club of Thane Uptown. So they have a Abharang program where it is about
Abhangrang.
Abharang. Ashokji, can you please explain that?
Yeah, it's a Abhangrang. Abhang is devotional songs which are sung during the pious period, what we are, passing through Shravan. So these are the praise of God, and this brings peace and there is a soothing effect on humanity, because we are going through a very bad phase right now due to COVID, due to earthquake and whatnot. So Abhangrang is something which will really, instill some peace and inner happiness. So please do come and listen to it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Please share that on the WhatsApp groups as well. Ashokji, thank you.
Sure.
Now I request my friend Rotarian President Rahul Khandelwal of RC Thane North End to give the vote of thanks. Rahul, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tejendra. And first of all, I would like to thank our speaker for the day, Honorable Lord Hunt of Wirral, Member of Parliament. It has been a pleasure to listen to you and your opinion on democratic parliament functioning. You had been speaking so much with passion. It very clearly speaks of your involvement, your experience, and your knowledge on this. It was wonderful to know it. And hearing that you had been associated with the 9 prime ministers of UK, that's really remarkable. And we relate quite a lot with Mrs. Margaret Thatcher, where she was the first prime minister, woman lady. And we also during the same time had the prime minister as Indira Gandhi. So that is where we related that well. And your principles, 7 principles of conducting public life, that is really good, and that should be implemented everywhere so as to have a accountability for the people to win. Really good. Thank you very much, Lord. I also would like to thank the club president, your club president, Rotarian David, and from the other 1130 district, Rotarian President Andrew, I think he had left, Rotarian Secretary Suresh, his wife Anjali, Rotarian John Buchanan, then the Rotarian President Philip Gebu from Ghana, Rotarian Sarah, and Rotarian Andrin from Nigeria. Thank you very much for joining this wonderful session. I would like to thank our district dignitaries, DG and Kailash Jethani, District Secretary Sangeeta Kapoor, Assistant Governor Nitin Doru, our past Chief Coordinator, past President Dinesh Mehtaji, and to place on record a very special thanks to the past President Vijay Keval Ramani for, I understand, getting so many dignitaries come in from various countries. That's really good of getting it. And the best part was of Tejinder and the complete team who have such a novel idea of having such joint meetings. Thank you very much. Thank you all the co-presidents who attended, all the club members who attended it. It was a really wonderful session. We enjoyed it a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Rahul. I now call the meeting to adjourn.